I remember the exact quality of the light that morning. It was that specific, blinding Santa Monica gold that floods the bedroom around 7:30 in the morning. It filters through the sheer linen curtains, hitting the dust motes dancing in the air, making everything look holy. That's the trick, isn't it? The universe makes things look their most beautiful right before they shatter. My name is Hatter. I'm 29 years old. Until 3 months ago, I thought I was the protagonist of a romantic comedy. The kind where the ambitious girl finally lands the perfect guy, and the credits roll over a sunset shot of the Pacific Coast Highway. I had the career, the apartment on Ocean Avenue with the view of the pier, and I had Mark. Mark. God. Just saying his name makes my teeth ache, like biting down on aluminum foil. He was the definition of a catch. 34. A venture capitalist with a jawline that could cut glass, and a way of looking at you that made you feel like you were the only person in the room. We had been together for 3 years. We were talking about a wedding in Napa. We were looking at houses in the Palisades. I was happy. That's the most embarrassing part of this whole story. I wasn't suspicious. I wasn't looking for trouble. I was blindly, stupidly, offensively happy. It happened on a Tuesday. Mark had left early for a breakfast meeting with a seed investor in Venice. He was always meticulous about his routine. Shower, espresso, 3 eggs, gym bag, out the door. But that morning, he'd left his gym bag sitting by the front door. He'd taken his briefcase but forgotten the duffel. I wouldn't have touched it normally. I respect privacy. But I noticed a smell coming from it. A damp, mildewy scent like wet towels left too long. I thought I'd be a good girlfriend. I thought I'd take his sweaty gear out and throw it in the wash so he wouldn't come home to a bag full of mold. It was a small act of service, a little domestic gesture of love. I unzipped the main compartment. It was standard stuff: boxing wraps, a towel, a change of socks. I dug deeper to find the sweaty shirt, and my hand brushed against something hard and cold tucked into the lining of the bottom panel. It wasn't a pocket. It was a tear in the lining that had been carefully pinned shut with a safety pin. I pulled it out. It was an iPhone. An older model, maybe an 8 or an X, with a cracked screen protector. For a second, I just held it. My brain tried to rationalize it. Maybe it was his old work phone. Maybe he used it for music. But why hide it inside the lining of a gym bag? Why pin it shut? My heart started to hammer against my ribs. It wasn't a fast panic. It was a slow, heavy thudding, like a war drum. I pressed the home button. The screen lit up. It wasn't a picture of us. It wasn't the default wallpaper. It was a photo of 2 children. 2 little girls, maybe 4 or 5 years old, wearing matching yellow raincoats, grinning toothless grins at the camera. I stared at them. I didn't know these children. I had never seen them before. The phone was passcoded. I tried Mark's birthday. Incorrect. I tried our anniversary. Incorrect. I tried the last 4 digits of his social. Incorrect. My hands were shaking so badly, I almost dropped the device. I looked at the little girls again. They had his eyes. They had that specific, crinkling shape at the corners that I used to trace with my thumb while he slept. I tried the date of the day we met. Nothing. Then, a notification popped up on the lock screen. A text message. Daddy, are you coming for the recital on Friday? Mom says to remind you to bring the check. Love you, Daddy. The word hung in the silent, sun-drenched apartment like a guillotine blade. I sat down on the floor right there in the hallway. The expensive engineered oak was cold against my legs. I felt like all the blood had been drained from my body. I wasn't Hannah, the successful marketing executive anymore. I was a ghost haunting my own life. Another text came through. Please don't be late this time, Mark. The girls were crushed last month. Also, the mortgage is due. Let me know when the transfer clears. Sarah. Sarah, I didn't scream. That's what they do in movies, right? They throw the phone, they scream, they break a vase. I didn't do any of that. I went completely still. It was like a switch flipped in my brain. The shock was so total, so absolute, that it bypassed hysteria and went straight to a cold, clinical paralysis. I had to get into that phone. I looked at the picture of the girls again. Raincoats. It looked like the Pacific Northwest. Maybe Seattle. Portland. Mark went on. Business trips. To Seattle once a month. He said it was for a tech incubator he was advising. I tried the date of the upcoming Friday. No. Then I looked at the time on the lock screen. 8:15 a.m. I remembered something Mark had told me on our first date, a throwaway comment about his favorite number. 7:14. It's lucky. I typed in 10:14. The phone unlocked. And just like that, the man I loved ceased to exist. In his place stood a monster. The next hour was a blur of digital excavation. I sat on the floor, scrolling. I read 3 years of messages. I looked at 5 years of photos. This wasn't an affair. This wasn't a fling. This was a parallel life. Her name was Sarah. They lived in Portland, Oregon. They had been married for 8 years. The twins, Maya and Chloe, were 5. He wasn't just cheating on me. He was cheating on them. And he was doing it with a level of sociopathic precision that made me want to vomit. I matched the dates. When we went to Cabo for my birthday last year, he told Sarah he was at a conference in San Diego. When he spent Christmas with his parents in Florida, he was actually in Portland with them. I scrolled back to December. There were photos of him in a Santa hat, holding the twins. He was wearing the sweater I bought him. The cashmere sweater I had wrapped and given him early because he said he'd be cold in Florida. He wore my gift to play father to his secret family. But the betrayal went deeper than just emotion. I opened the banking app he had installed on the burner phone. It was logged in with FaceID, but the passcode worked there too. I looked at the transactions. My stomach dropped. Mark had always been vague about his liquidity. He lived well. Dinners at Nobu, weekend getaways to Ojai, the lease on his Audi. He let me pay for the apartment rent because his capital was tied up in equity. But he covered the lifestyle. I looked at the transfer history. Every month, there was a transfer of $4,000 from an account labeled Consulting LLC. I recognized that LLC name. It was the shell company he had me set up for tax purposes, regarding my own freelance consulting work. He wasn't just lying to me. He was stealing from me. He had access to my business accounts. I had given it to him because I trusted him with my life. I trusted him with my future. He was funneling money out of my business, washing it through this burner account, and sending it to Sarah to pay the mortgage on a house in Portland. I was paying for his wife's house. I was funding the life he kept hidden from me. I put the phone down. I felt the urge to throw up rising in my throat, violent and acidic. I ran to the bathroom and heaved over the toilet for 10 minutes. Nothing came up but bile. I washed my face. I looked in the mirror. My eyes looked different. Older. Harder. I heard the front door open. Han. You. Home. I forgot my gym bag. Total idiot move him. Panic flared for a second, hot and white. I had to hide the phone. I had to scream. I had to kill him. No. I took a deep breath. I looked at my reflection. I smoothed my hair. In the bathroom, babe, I called out. My voice sounded steady. It sounded normal. It terrified me how easy it was to lie. I grabbed the burner phone from the counter where I'd left it. I ran to the hallway. I shoved it back into the tear in the lining of the bag. I pinned the safety pin back, exactly as it was. I stepped out of the bathroom, just as he walked into the bedroom. He looked perfect. Crisp white shirt, sleeves rolled up to the elbows, that easy, confident smile. Hey, he said, coming over to kiss me. I let him. I let him put his lips on mine. I smelled his cologne, Santal 33. The same scent I used to inhale like oxygen. Now, it smelled like deception. I felt his hand on my waist. The hand that held his children. The hand that typed lies to his wife. You okay? He asked, pulling back slightly. You look a little pale. Just a headache, I said. I forced a smile. Migraine coming on. I think I need to lay down in the dark for a bit. Poor baby, he said, stroking my hair. Do you want me to stay? I can push the meeting. No, I said quickly. No, you go. You have that pitch. Go get them. He smiled, that dazzling, boyish smile. You're the best. I'll be back around 6. Dinner at Giorgio's. Sounds perfect, I said. He grabbed the gym bag. He didn't check it. He swung it over his shoulder, blew me a kiss, and walked out the door. I watched him go. I watched the door click shut. I walked to the window and watched him get into his car. I watched him drive away. And as I stood there, watching the man I thought was my soulmate drive off to continue his charade, the grief began to curdle. The sadness evaporated. What was left was something cold, something sharp, something like ice forming over a deep, dark lake. He thought he was the player. He thought I was the NPC, the supporting character in the movie of his life. He thought he could use my money, my body, and my love to fuel his ego, while he played house in 2 different states. He had no idea who he was dealing with. I didn't want to just leave him. Leaving him would be too easy. Leaving him would let him spin the narrative. He'd tell Sarah I was a crazy ex. He'd tell our friends we just grew apart. He'd walk away with my money and his reputation intact. No, I was going to dismantle him. I was going to take apart his life, brick by brick, until there was nothing left but the truth. I went to my laptop. I opened a new spreadsheet. I named it Project Demolition. Step 1, Intelligence. Step 2, Financial Containment. Step 3, the reveal. I had work to do. The next 3 weeks were the greatest acting performance of my life. I was the perfect girlfriend. I cooked his favorite meals. I listened to him complain about his investors. I had sex with him, which was the hardest part. I had to dissociate, staring at the ceiling, imagining I was floating in the ocean, miles away from his touch. I let him believe he was safe. I let him believe he was in control. Meanwhile, I was bleeding him dry. I started with the finances. Since I had access to the Consulting LLC account, technically, it was in my name, even if he managed it. I went to the bank the very next day. I didn't close it. That would alert him. Instead, I set up a mirrored transfer. Every time he moved money from my main business account into the LLC, an automatic script I set up immediately moved 90% of it into a secure, high-yield savings account he didn't know existed. When the first mortgage payment for the Portland house bounced, he was frantic. I was in the kitchen making matcha when he came storming in, looking at his phone. "Damn it," he muttered. "What's wrong?" I asked, keeping my back to him, whisking the green powder. "Bank error," he said, wiping sweat from his forehead. "My transfers are frozen. Probably a fraud flag. It's annoying." "Oh no," I said, turning around with a sympathetic pout. "Do you need me to call the bank?" "No," he snapped. Then he softened. "No, babe, it's fine. I'll handle it. Just tech glitch." He had to take a cash advance on his credit card to pay Sarah. I saw the transaction alert on the joint statement he thought I never checked. He was bleeding liquidity. He was stressed. He started drinking more. I watched it all with clinical fascination. Then came the social engineering. Mark was planning a launch party for his new venture firm, Apex Capital. It was all smoke and mirrors, of course. He was trying to raise $5 million from investors in Los Angeles, using my connections in the design and real estate world to gain credibility. He wanted the party to be at a private estate in Malibu. He wanted it to be the event of the season. "This is it, Hannah," he told me one night, his eyes shining with manic energy. "Once this fund closes, we're set. We can buy the house. We can do everything. I know you can do it." I cooed. "Let me help you with the guest list. I can get the RSVP tracking done." "You're an angel," he said. I took control of the guest list. I invited the investors he wanted. I invited my friends. I invited his colleagues. And then, I did the unthinkable. I found Sarah on Facebook. It wasn't hard. Her profile was locked down, but she was tagged in photos by the local PTA. I found her email address through a simple data broker search. Cost me $19.95. I created a fake email account from a high-end concierge service. I sent her an email. "Dear Mrs. Reynolds, your husband, Mark Reynolds, has been selected as the recipient of the Visionary of the Year award at the upcoming Apex Capital Gala in Malibu. As part of the surprise, we are flying families of the honorees out for the weekend. We know Mark has been working hard in Los Angeles, and he speaks of you and the girls constantly. We would love to surprise him with your presence. All expenses paid. First class travel. A private villa for the weekend. Please keep this a secret from Mark. We want to see the look on his face." It was a gamble. If she called him, it was over. But I knew the type of relationship they had. He was the distant provider. She was the supportive wife, waiting for scraps of attention. A grand gesture like this. She would want to believe it. She would want to be the proud wife. She replied 4 hours later. "Oh my God. This is amazing. He has been working so hard. We would love to come." I won't say a word. I booked the tickets. I booked the driver. I charged it all to Mark's own emergency credit card, the one he kept in the safe. The trap was set. But I wasn't done. I needed to ensure that when he fell, he didn't just lose his marriage. I needed him to lose his future. Mark needed a lead investor to anchor the fund. He had been courting a man named David Thorne, a real estate mogul and a close friend of my father. Mark had been using my name to get meetings with David. I invited David to lunch 3 days before the party. We sat at a quiet table at the back of the restaurant. I didn't cry. I didn't play the victim. I laid a manila folder on the table. Inside were the bank statements showing Mark embezzling from my company, the photos of the text messages, the proof of the double life. David opened the folder. He read in silence. He was a hard man, a businessman, but his face turned red. "He's been lying to me about his liquidity," I said calmly. "He's using my money to fake solvency to get your money. If you invest in Apex, you're investing in a Ponzi scheme run by a man who can't even keep his own zip codes straight." David closed the folder. He looked at me with a mixture of pity and respect. "What do you want me to do, Hannah? I'll kill the deal right now." "No," I said. "Don't kill it yet. Come to the party. Bring the contract. Let him think he's won. I want him to sign the personal guarantee clauses. I want him to be legally on the hook for the venue, the catering, and the initial operational costs. And then, I want you to watch." David nodded slowly. "You're your father's daughter, Hannah. I'll take that as a compliment." The night of the party was warm. The Pacific breeze was rolling off the ocean, smelling of salt and jasmine. The Malibu estate was lit up like a jewel box. Waiters circulated with champagne trays. A jazz quartet played soft, unobtrusive music. Mark looked incredible. He was wearing a midnight blue tuxedo. He looked like James Bond. He looked like a winner. He was gripping a glass of scotch, buzzing around the room, shaking hands, clapping shoulders. He was in his element. "Look at this," he whispered to me, pulling me close. "It's happening, Han. David is here. He's going to sign the commitment letter tonight. We're going to be rich." "I'm so proud of you," I said. I was wearing a dress I bought specifically for this moment. It was red, blood red, backless. A dress that said, "I am the fire, not the fuel." The party reached its peak around 9 p.m. Mark clinked a spoon against his glass. The music stopped. The room went quiet. He stepped onto the small stage we had set up. A spotlight hit him. "Thank you all for coming," he began, his voice smooth, projecting confidence. "Apex Capital is more than a fund. It's a family. It's about building a legacy. And I couldn't have done this without the support of the people who believe in me." He looked at me. "My beautiful partner, Hannah, you are my rock." The crowd applauded politely. I smiled, a tight, predatory smile. "And now," Mark said, "I have a special announcement. David Thorne, a titan of industry, is officially joining us as our lead partner." David stepped forward. He didn't smile. He handed Mark a document. "Just need the signature on the liability waivers and the personal guarantee for the initial capital call, Mark," David said, loud enough for the front row to hear. Of course, of course." Mark laughed. He signed it with a flourish. He had just legally bound himself to debts he couldn't pay without the investment money he thought he was getting. "Don't," Mark beamed. "Now, let's celebrate." I stepped up to the microphone. "Actually," I said, my voice ringing out clear and sharp over the speakers, "I have one more surprise for you, Mark." Mark looked at me, confused. "Hannah, you said this is about family," I said, addressing the crowd. "And I know how much family means to you. So, I thought it was a shame that your whole family wasn't here to see your big moment." I signaled the security guard at the back entrance. The double doors opened. Sarah walked in. She was holding the hands of two little girls in matching velvet dresses. She looked overwhelmed, dazzled by the lights, but her eyes lit up when she saw him. "Mark!" she cried out, waving. Surprise. The room went deadly silent. Mark dropped his glass. It shattered on the stone floor. The sound like a gunshot. His face drained of color. He looked like he had been struck by lightning. He looked from Sarah to me, and then back to Sarah. "Daddy!" the twins yelled, breaking free from Sarah's hands and running toward the stage. The crowd parted for them. It was gruesome. It was perfect. Sarah walked closer, her smile faltering as she sensed the tension in the room. She looked at me. I was standing next to Mark, looking like the mistress of the house. She looked at Mark, who looked like he wanted the earth to swallow him whole. "Mark," she asked, her voice trembling. "Who are these people? You said." The email said. Mark couldn't speak. He was gasping for air. I leaned into the microphone one last time. "Mark," I said softly, "why don't you introduce your wife to your investors?" The murmur started then. It rippled through the crowd like a wave. Shock. Disgust. Phones came out. People were recording. Mark looked at me. His eyes were wide with terror and hatred. "What did you do?" he hissed. "I just checked the gym bag." I whispered back, off mic. Then I turned to David Thorne. "David," I said, "I think you might want to review that contract." David stepped up. "Mark," he said, his voice booming, "this investment is contingent on character due diligence. I think you just failed." He ripped the check he was holding in half. "But the personal guarantee you just signed for the venue, and the vendor costs. That's binding. You owe the catering company $40,000. Good luck." David turned and walked away. The investors followed. The room cleared out with brutal speed. I stood there for a moment, watching the wreckage. Sarah was crying now, screaming at Mark, hitting his chest. The twins were wailing. Mark was trying to grab Sarah's hands, trying to spin a lie that wouldn't hold, looking over her shoulder at me with eyes that promised murder. I didn't feel fear. I didn't feel sadness. I felt clean. I walked down the stairs of the stage. I walked past them. I didn't look at Mark. I stopped in front of Sarah. "I didn't know," I said to her quietly. "I'm sorry. The car outside will take you and the girls to a hotel. It's paid for a week. He doesn't have any money left. Sarah, check your accounts." She stared at me, her face a mask of ruined mascara and betrayal. She didn't thank me. I didn't expect her to. I had used her as a weapon. I was no saint. I walked out of the estate. I gave my keys to the valet. "Ocean Avenue," I said. The fallout was swift and catastrophic. Mark tried to come to the apartment that night. I had already changed the locks and left a box of his things with the doorman. The doorman, a sturdy ex-Marine named Clive who I had tipped generously for years, didn't let him past the lobby. I heard later that Mark made a scene. He screamed my name. He threatened to sue. Then the police came and escorted him away. The next few weeks were a parade of legal letters. Mark tried to claim I had stolen his money. My lawyers, paid for with the money I saved from his embezzlement attempts, produced the logs, the IP addresses, the burner phone datas, which I had backed up. He went quiet after that. Sarah divorced him. She took the house in Portland, though it was underwater because he hadn't been paying the mortgage. She moved back in with her parents. I sent an anonymous cashier's check for $10,000 to an address in Oregon a few months later. Call it guilt money. Call it a severance package. I never heard back. Mark's reputation in Los Angeles was incinerated. The venture capital world is small. Word travels. You can fail at business, and they will forgive you. You can lose money, and they will give you a second chance. But if you publicly humiliate a room full of powerful people by inviting your secret wife to a fraudulent gala, you're radioactive. He lost his job. He lost his investors. He lost the lease on his Audi. Last I heard, he was living in a shared apartment in the valley, working sales for a solar panel company, trying to hustle unsuspecting homeowners. As for me, I'm still in Santa Monica. I still drink my coffee in the morning light. It took time. I'm not going to lie and say I bounced back instantly. I spent nights crying into my pillow. I spent weeks feeling phantom limbs, reaching out for a man who never really existed. I had to forgive myself for being so blind. That was the hardest part, forgiving the girl who trusted him. But I kept the apartment. I kept my business. And I kept my dignity. Sometimes, when I'm running along the Palisades, looking out at the ocean, I think about that gym bag. I think about how thin the veil is between a perfect life and a nightmare. A single safety pin. People say revenge is a dish best served cold. I disagree. Revenge isn't a dish. It's a mirror. It forces someone to look at exactly who they are. I held up the mirror. Mark didn't like what he saw. And me. I learned that I'm not just the protagonist of a rom-com. I'm the director. And if you try to rewrite my script, I will burn your whole production to the ground. The sun is setting now. The sky is a bruise of purple and orange. It's beautiful. And for the first time in a long time, it's real.